Okay, so just by way of an announcement, um,
Want a cough drop?
yeah, thanks. That's good. Thank
And
you.
here I found
Oh,
news
thanks.
that was
Hey, I'm gonna start coughing more. Can we get you some Vicks? I'm gonna save this one for later. So at any rate, tonight, as you know, is the last dinner, and I have this room reserved on Tuesday nights until the 18th of June. So at least next week, we haven't gotten to the rapture and a lot of other key things, but um, we'll continue to meet on Tuesday nights beginning at 6:30. Uh, Man, I can't believe this.
This is real Tito's.
Thank you, everyone. So we'll be here if anybody wants to attend Tuesday next and go at least until the 18th of June. That's how long we have the room, and I think they're going to close it down after that. So we'll see how it goes. And if you can't make it, we'll be on YouTube. If you want to tune us in there, you just go to Google Bob Sullivan Prophecy. It'll take you right there, and we'll be good to go. So what we're going to do tonight. So tonight I want to finish with Ezekiel 39. And if we get time to start our examination of the rapture, we've talked a lot of gloom and doom things over the last several months. So I want to really focus and dig into what is truly our blessed hope as we that waits ahead for us, the rapture of the church. So we'll see if we get that tonight. But a couple of articles I wanted to go through, beginning with one that is not a surprise to any of us, but this is really a big deal. And it has to do, and we've talked a lot about it, but the exploding anti-Semitism and how the world is moving toward virtually a total rejection of Israel. And when we get to the rapture, I have a study that I did listening to Mark Hitchcock recently, and he makes an excellent case that this rising, exploding anti-Semitism is a sign that the rapture's got to be pretty close. And so we'll talk about that. I also have a study I did and listened to not too long ago and outlined on the days of Noah. And we'll get to that. And the general theme of that study is what this particular fellow, his name is Lee Brainerd, talked about, and that was what he called relative normalcy. And we're living in a time of, quote, relative normalcy, but what we're seeing are normal things beginning to become less normal, more abnormal. And kind of an interesting study, I thought, kind of a different spin that I hadn't thought about before. But he makes the case that as we move further and further and further away from what we know to be normal and has been normal for the last 200 or 2,000 years, whichever way you want to look at it, uh, we really can't get too far out of the realm of normal. So we'll talk more about that. Another clear indication that the rapture is soon coming. But this particular article is entitled Anti-Semitism Surging. We know that. Uh, Prompting fear for future of Jewish life in the West. And the West, of course, includes the United States and Europe and other places outside the Far East and so forth. Some pretty startling statistics. But it says in 2023, France registered, because this is not just in the United States, this is global, this exploding anti-Semitism. France registered the highest increase in recorded anti Semitic incidents of any country with reliable statistics, according to data released in a new report that warned that current trends could threaten the very, quote, ability to lead Jewish lives in the West. a near quadrupling of incidents in France from 436 in 2022 to 1676 last year. It also highlighted anti-Semitism on U.S. campuses, which the head of the Anti-Defamation League called the most alarming aspect of the surge of Jew hatred in the United States. In France, the tally showed that 74% happened of the anti-Semitic incidents. And they don't really say what they are, but a lot of them are of violent nature and just saying bad things, hate speech, that sort of thing. That the tally showed that 74% happened after October 7th, when invading Hamas terrorists killed some 1,200 people in Israel and abducted another 253, triggering a still ongoing military campaign by Israel in Gaza and daily exchanges with Hezbollah, etc. In the United States, the tally more than doubled from 3,697 incidents in 2022 to 7,523 last year. So more than doubled, with 52% of the 2023 incidents occurring after October 7th. So with October 7th and what the Palestinians or what the terrorists did on October 7th, that's had an increase. It's resulted in an increase in anti-Semitism. I mean, it just has to be satanic when you think about it. In Canada, the increase was from 65 to 132. United Kingdom from 1662 to 4,103. Germany 2639 to 3614, and Italy 241 to 454. So we're seeing anti-Semitism just spread all around the world. October 7th was a golden opportunity to advance further their hateful and racist fringe perspectives into mainstream conservative discourse, using it to attack rivals, mobilize supporters, and attract new followers. The Irwin Coulter Institute wrote in a press release, quote, "If current trends continue, the curtain will descend on the ability to lead Jewish lives in the West, to wear a Star of David, attend synagogues and community centers, send kids to Jewish schools, frequent a Jewish club on campus, or to speak Hebrew. Jewish and pro-Israel students have been physically assaulted, verbally harassed, bullied online, and generally made to feel unsafe on campus, while Jewish fraternities, Hillel and Shabbat houses, and even dorm rooms have been vandalized. Nearly 75% of American university students have said they experienced or witnessed some form of anti-Semitism since the academic year began. All this occurred as the leadership of academia fell silent, particularly at America's most elite universities. So we're seeing it everywhere. And that is, to me, one of the most astounding signs that the Lord's return is near. It's going to continue. It's only going to get worse and worse. And I think the big question is, are we headed toward another Holocaust? Well, we are. We know that the second half of the tribulation will be a Holocaust much worse than what they experienced in the 30s and 40s. Washington. Okay, here's another one. And we all heard this on the news, which I think is just appalling, uh, evil. It's almost hard to even conceive, but here it is. U.S. President Joe Biden's administration has been holding up several shipments of weapons to Israel for at least 2 weeks, and of course, they're threatening more. Interesting, they're threatening not to send guided bombs, which they're so concerned about the humanitarian issues that they're not sending guided bombs, which, if you ever watch the videos, they're able to throw those right through an open window. So now if they don't have the guidance they need, it's going to be a lot more reckless, and it opens up opportunities for a lot more civilians if it gets to that point. Washington said it could not support an Israeli invasion. And I think anybody looked at Amir today, and it looked to me like wherever they've gone so far, there have been very few people there.
Yeah.
There are very few people there because Israel has guided them out of the way, right? Yeah.
500,000 have moved.
Yeah.
Last I read.
Yeah. So, I mean, all of this stuff coming from Washington, I think all it represents anti-Jewish belief system. Um, Washington wanted to send a political message to Israel. Washington said it could not support an Israeli invasion of the Gaza border city of Rafah without an appropriate and credible humanitarian plan. You know, a significant percentage of people, both in this country and certainly Israel, believe that Israel is doing the right thing. So it comes down to these few evil leaders that we have in this country, and Blinken is right, and Blinken's Jewish. You know that they're supporting all these actions, including us sending weapons to Israel. And all I can say is we better hope the rapture happens because the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, I am surprised. And who knows? I mean, I'm not going to be dogmatic about this, but we've had record tornadoes, record flooding, a solar event. You know, I mean, the skies were beautiful, but the potential to cause harm is pretty great. And I think I just read on Amir's site there was another big one today, another big solar. So I don't know what that means. I haven't really followed the news to see what's going on, but don't ever underestimate what God can do and the judgment that He can pour out. So, and then in response to that, Bibi Netanyahu says Israel will stand alone if it must after Biden's remarks. And I love Bibi Netanyahu. You know, some people don't like him and he gets a lot of bad press. And, you know, it's kind of like certain people in this country that, you know, you can't believe anything people say about it. But Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel will stand alone. If that's not Numbers 23:5, I think it is, I don't know what is. I mean, that's where Israel will stand alone among the nations. If it has to, in a veiled message to President Biden's threat about withholding weapons. If Israel has to stand alone, we'll stand alone, Netanyahu said in a statement. If we need to, we'll fight with our fingernails, but we have much more than our fingernails. Biden warned Israel on Wednesday that if it proceeds with an invasion into the southern Gaza city of Rafah, where hundreds of thousands of people are taking refuge, he would stop supplying offensive weapons like bombs and artillery shells. So at the same time, they're talking about the two-state solution. That's what they're pushing for. And Israel cannot afford, they have to take Hamas out. They don't have a choice. And that requires going into Rafah. Netanyahu's message was aimed at the growing number of countries that have criticized Israel's destruction of Gaza. His message for the world leaders, quote, no amount of pressure, no decision by any international forum will stop Israel from defending itself. Israel has repeatedly threatened to invade the city, which is also a hub for humanitarian aid operations. Netanyahu claims that Rafah is the last stronghold of Hamas, and the Israeli Defense Forces must go in to secure the remaining hostages taken on October 7th. So it's just, I tell you, I never thought we'd see a day like this when we have such things going on. But you know, a lot of things are happening in a very, I think, subtle in nondescript way. And one thing that I did hear, and I don't have an article to support it right now, but listening to Britt Gillette the other day, and he said it's now being reported that it's anticipated that 1 to 2 banks a week are going to start to fall and go under. 1 to 2 small regional banks per week. And that is in large part due to the uh, interest rates and the lack of the commercial real estate loans and so forth. So here's another indication that we're starting to see some really bad things occur in the economy. And the title of this article is "Restaurant Apocalypse is Starting to Sweep Across the Nation as Americans cut back. And I've talked to so many people, and we've all experienced going out to dinner anymore is becoming unaffordable. You can't even go to McDonald's anymore. In 2024, it appears that a restaurant apocalypse has started to sweep across America. Most people have very little discretionary income to spend as a result of our cost of living crisis, and this is particularly true for our young adults. Americans are eating out less as inflation weakens the dollars in their pockets, which is leading to some harsh consequences for restaurants across the country. Visits to sit-down restaurants were down nearly 5% in 2023 from the year prior, according to location analytics firm Placer.ai. We're seeing a wave of closures all over the country. Even in the Big Apple, large numbers of restaurants are being shut down. I mean, who wants to go to New York City anymore? Was it that actor the other day that just got sucker punched in the eye? Just some guy comes up and just hits him and almost knocked him out. He had to have stitches and tough stuff's going on. I heard about another 11-year-old girl in New York City walking down the street with her mother, and she was yeah, a guy used a box cutter on the back of her head. Yeah, and she survived it, but she's had to have surgery, and now she doesn't want to go to school. She doesn't want to go out. I mean, who would? I mean, these things are just happening everywhere. Remember, Jesus said that there will be an increase in lawlessness, an ongoing increase in lawlessness that we're seeing virtually everywhere. After closing 46 restaurants last year, Applebee's has decided to close another 35 locations this year. And that's just an act of desperation. I would say that probably not too long, Applebee's will be gone. I don't know how many there are around here. I know there's one in Bristol, but and maybe a few others here.
I have certificates, I better use them fast.
Pardon me?
I have certificates, I better use them fast, right?
Mm.
For Applebee's.
Yeah,
Better use them.
It's in
yeah.
Plainville. Applebee's is in Plainville.
Or Plainville. Okay.
Sorry.
Applebee's is too close is to close another 35 locations this year after shuttering 46 in 2023. Red Lobster, they're about done, is also deeply struggling as it abruptly closed at least 48 of its restaurants in the latest blow to a financially struggling company that reportedly is considering whether to declare bankruptcy. In the case of Boston Market, a chain that once had nearly 1,000 locations nationwide, the company's death has been slow, but the pace of his demise has picked up over the past few months. Now, with its store count continuing to dip, the chain seems to have reached the end, but won't confirm that given there are no longer appears to be anyone around to make that decision. Jessica Dunker, the president and CEO of Iowa Restaurants Association, said the reason restaurants are shuttering is because the cost of goods is up 30%. People like to say that restaurants and grocery stores are gouging. It's just not true. I mean, there are probably some examples of that here and there, but today the Biden administration came out, and the cost of production went up again last month. And of course, it doesn't have anything to do with them. And they're going to go after grocery stores and try to control prices and so on and so forth. But cost of goods up 30%, and they're having to shell out higher wages. That's another thing. It's a minimum wage in California for people who work at places like McDonald's now is $20 an hour. And it's just not that type of thing's not sustainable. Unfortunately, things aren't going to get better anytime soon. For example, the cost of orange juice is expected to go up dramatically because of a very bad harvest in Brazil. So it's not just the economy, but it's weather conditions. We've reached a point where the vast majority of Americans just can't afford to eat out on a regular basis. Needless to say, that is really bad news for fast food chains like McDonald's. At one time, serving middle class families was their core business. But now most middle class families just can't afford to eat at McDonald's very often. In a desperate attempt to lure them back, McDonald's will soon introduce a $5 meal deal. But they're only going to do it for a month. So, yeah. So they're just going to bring back affordable food for 1 month. That's just great. So the American people are deeply pessimistic about the economy at this stage, and they have good reason to be pessimistic because even though our politicians in Washington are engaged in an unprecedented spending spree in a desperate attempt to keep the economy propped up, the truth is that the wheels are starting to come off and tremendous chaos is ahead. What happens to the Biden economy? What happens to the Biden economy? The economy is going to take a nosedive sometime in the next 12 months. The real economy is not doing well. The only thing that's been holding up the GDP is the government spending. We're spending $1 trillion every 100 days. And that's all printed money. It's fiat money. And at one time, the entire world marveled at the greatness of the mighty U.S. economy, but our leaders have completely wrecked it. There's no way we're going to be able to avoid disaster. So I would encourage you to prepare for very hard times while you still can. So one person's opinion, and as we see when we get to, there's just something, it's just amazing the way everything just kind of fits together. When we get to the days of Noah study, what I was talking about earlier, this relative normalcy. And that's really kind of the way it's going to be. People marrying, giving in marriage, going about their business, nothing wrong, everything's fine. And it's kind of I think, an interesting thing that we'll talk about when we get to it. Okay. Another thing, and this ought to be,
The good thing about the cashless society is that the government can't print money anymore.
yeah, right. So I want to just quickly read a verse from the book of Daniel, Daniel chapter 7. We've looked at it many, many times, but I think it's an important thing to bear in mind because this is what's coming. Um, talking about the fourth beast in Daniel chapter 7, verse 23. The fourth beast being the coming 10-member nation, the 10 world, the 10 government, the 10 regional governments that will rule the earth, out of which will come the Antichrist. He gave me this explanation in verse 23. The fourth beast is a fourth kingdom that will appear on the earth. It will be different from all the other kingdoms and will devour the whole earth, trampling it down and crushing it. The 10 horns are 10 kings who will come from this kingdom, and then another king will arise from the earlier ones. He will subdue 3 kings. He will speak against the Most High and oppress his holy people and try to change the set times and laws. The holy people will be delivered into his hands for a time, times, and half times. That's a reference to what's going to happen to the Jews during the second half of the tribulation. But the key is here, he will speak against the Most High. Actually, I go back to 23, that it will be different from all the other kingdoms and will devour the whole earth, trampling it down and crushing it. So this is a clear indication that when he comes, he's going to be the most tyrannical leader the world's ever seen. Tyrannical, ruthless. It's going to be hell on earth during that period of time. Fortunately, as believers, we're not going to be here. But we're starting to see, just like we're seeing with the economy, we're starting to see, I think, inroads being made toward this tyrannical form of government. Listen to this. Canada is like, he's like a little Hitler, that guy. And the government there is so bad. So here it says, Canada to imprison anyone who has ever posted hate speech online. The Trudeau regime has introduced an Orwellian new law called the Online Harms Bill C-63, which will give police the power to retroactively search the internet for hate speech violations. So, question there is, what's hate speech? Telling somebody that about Jesus, is that hate speech? Could be. Violations and arrest offenders, even if the offense occurred before the law. So there's going to be a retroactive law. Usually, when a bill is approved and goes into existence, that it's effective the day it goes in. This is going to be retroactive back. So anything people said or did in the past that is perceived as quote hate speech, they're going to be they run the risk of being in violation of this new law. This new bill is aimed at safeguarding the masses from so-called hate speech. The real shocker in this bill is the alarming retroactive aspect. Essentially, whatever you've said in the past can now be weaponized against you by today's draconian standards. Canada's not too far away from us if you think about it. It literally spits in the face of all Western legal traditions, especially the one about only being punished if you infringed on a law that was valid at the time of committing the crime. Anything you've posted, ever, dating back to the dawn of the internet. In other words, it's a gold embossed invitation to offense archaeologists to do their worst, with the prospect of a $20,000 reward if they had paid her. So that's going to motivate and incentivize people for a pretty big payout to turn in friends and relatives. And if it's determined that this 10-year-old email or whatever is hate speech, as determined by who? The government, obviously. Somebody's going to be potentially get a reward up to $20,000. If the courts believe you are likely to commit a hate crime or disseminate hate propaganda not defined, you can be placed under house arrest and your ability to communicate with others restricted. That is, a court can force you to wear an ankle bracelet, prevent you using any of your communication devices, and then instruct you not to leave the house. This is a new law. It's in effect now in Canada.
1984.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, just there's a lot more to it, but this is the last little blurb. No doubt this is bone-chilling, scary stuff coming out of Canada, but don't think it couldn't happen in the United States, because it can. In fact, the regime-run media is already making the case for it as we speak. So our media, and I don't think it's any secret that what they're doing. So now, here's one along the same lines regarding the Biden administration. They've been eavesdropping and surveilling people ever since the very beginning. But here's a damning report details Biden administration's big tech censorship push. Internal communications of executives from big tech companies reveal, quote, damning discoveries of the Biden administration's attempt to muzzle the platforms. A new House committee report published this week revealed. Following House Judiciary Chairman Jim Jordan's subpoena, tech giants like Google parent Alphabet, Amazon, Apple, Meta, and Microsoft were investigated regarding their communications with the federal government. The House Judiciary Committee's 800-page report titled, quote, The Censorship Industrial Complex, How Top Biden and White House Officials Coerce Big Tech to Censor Americans, True Information, and the Critics of the Biden Administration, included several instances where the platform censored information relating to COVID-19 due to top-down pressure. The emails also revealed the Biden administration wanted to crack down on vaccine misinformation. While some executives were unwilling to cave to the pressure, other executives did give in to limit bigger issues. I mean, they were intimidated. If they didn't give in, who knows what would have happened. Big Tech altered their content moderation policies in 2021, the report said. Facebook, YouTube, and Amazon, we've experienced we've actually been shut down on this little bit of YouTube thing we have for a couple of weeks. Twice, I think, right, Bob? Yeah. Um, Misinformation to what kinds of books were permissible on the Amazon marketplace. Indeed, both Facebook and Amazon referred to the Biden White House's efforts as pressure. Biden White House censorship campaign also targeted true information, satire, and other content not violating platform policies, according to the report. And that's really all I've got there. But this censorship and surveillance by our government is pervasive, and it's the CIA, it's the FBI, it's Homeland Security. They're all watching, and this report, I think, coming out of Canada is to me very, very damning, and I think cause for great concern. So, questions, comments on any of that?
I heard an interview yesterday by Tucker Carlson. He was interviewing Justin Trudeau, the
His brother.
premier candidate, his half brother.
Yeah.
It was very interesting. They're quite different people. And it's a long interview, but the point, one of the main points I remember from it is that he said all the stuff that we were just talking about that we don't like what's happening in Canada is a result of, just like with the US, from the elites. It's a relatively small percentage. That most of the country of Canada, the regular people, you might say, are regular people not wanting this stuff to happen. Remember the trucker thing that ended up, I think, in Ottawa, and all that? He talked about that quite a bit. But basically, the essence of all that was that the truckers and the regular people living in Canada weren't in favor of all this stuff, but they don't have the power. The power's in the hands of a few, and in this case, in Ottawa. So,
Yeah, what we're seeing is a deletion or doing away with the middle class. It's going to be a few elites and the lower class. And
I don't understand how come they haven't had an election in such a long time. I mean,
they did have one a couple
I
of
don't
years.
hear all
Yeah.
those things about people not liking Trudeau, but somehow or another he stays in power.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about it, but I did hear today that there's a candidate going to run against him. So
Conservative.
I believe so, but I didn't read the article. I read the headline.
Okay.
I thought this was, I was listening to TIC radio as I was over today. And they said, how does immigration impact economy? More immigrants create more economic growth. And because it creates more economic growth locally, it raises the wages of the people who are already there. So in other words, that's where your inflation is coming from. And this has been teetered over all these years, not just now.
Yeah.
And then one other thing, you mentioned the numbers 23, 25. Then Balak said to Balaam, fine, but if you won't curse them, at least don't bless them. But Balaam replied to Balak, didn't I tell you that I can only do what the Lord tells me?
Right.
So everything goes back to the Lord.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's all about him. All right. So with that, I'd like to move into Ezekiel 39. We went through 38 last week. We'll just go through this because it's very informative, I think. And we saw in the 38, we won't read it again, obviously, but we saw that Israel will be attacked at some point in time by his Confederacy of Nations, which is amazingly coming together today. And we're seeing it. We watch it on the news. And imagine being Ezekiel as he pens his prophecy 2,600 years ago. He faithfully recorded God's words, but he could not possibly have understood what we're watching today. Again, this is revealed or progressive revelation, if you will, that as time goes on, things that have been written in the scriptures become more evident. And I'm not sure there's too much more that's not yet been revealed. We know we've got the benefit of looking back in history. That doesn't mean we know all the details. I mean, we can, like, when does Ezekiel 38 and 39 happen? Yeah, I was just doing some study today, and in Andy Woods's book, he points out that there are at least 7 different views as to when this is going to happen. Some are pre-trib, some are post-trib, some are pre-wrath, some are, even beginning. It's the entire tribulation. I think, see as we go through 39, I think the argument for this being most likely, although who knows for sure, before or after the tribulation makes a considerable amount of sense. That doesn't mean that it's going to happen that way. There's nothing that says we can't wake up uh, in the not too distant future and see that Russia is beginning to move on Israel. It could happen. It's going to require that Israel thinks they're in peace and safety. Um, so that's not happened yet. But let's just go through this, and I think this is very telling. And this is obviously the only way and the only time that this prophecy, the Gog and Magog prophecy, could be fulfilled was after Israel's back on the land. They had to be a nation. People had to be returning from the 4 corners of the earth, which is exactly what we've seen in Jack's lifetime. Not mine, but Jack's lifetime. Jack's seen the beginning of it. Jack's been there for the whole thing.
So you get a horse.
I'm actually older than Jack.
A month.
So at any rate, Ezekiel 39, and we'll just go through this. Son of man, prophesy against Gog, the leader of this confederacy, and say, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I am against you, Gog, chief prince of Meshach and Tubal. So we see that it's God that's orchestrating this thing. He's the one that's putting it into place. I will turn you around and drag you along. I will bring you from the far north and send you against the mountains of Israel. Now, I think most scholars would say that when he says the mountains of Israel and coming from the north, and really, if you think about Israel, the only major way that an attack can occur is from the north. From the east is all desert for the most part. And the west, of course, the Mediterranean Sea. So there's going to be some nations that are going to come out probably from the south, Sudan and Libya, but it's got to almost come from the north. So I will turn you around, drag you along. I will bring you from the far north and send you against the mountains of Israel. I take that to mean the mountains that we know today to be the Golan Heights. So they're going to move toward the Golan. Then I will strike your bow from your left hand and make your arrows drop from your right. So notice who's coming to Israel's defense. It's not the Israeli Defense Forces that's going to defeat this enemy. And it would be too much for Israel, humanly speaking, to be able to do this in the first place. It's got to require God's intervention. On the mountains of Israel you will fall, and all your troops and nations with you. I will give you as food to all kinds of carrion, buzzards, eagles, whatever other birds of prey are there, and to the wild animals. So there's going to be this massive, uh, uh, no, there'll be a massive number of these troops that are going to fall in this thing. And if you went to the King James version of the Ezekiel 39, you would know that in verse 12 or verse 2, it says that 5/6 of this confederacy will be killed. 5/6. That's what, 80 some percent that will be killed and nobody left. And it's God that's doing it. You will fall in the open field, and I have spoken, declares the Lord. I will send fire on Magog and those who live in safety in the coastlands, and you will know that I am the Lord. So there's the key right there. God's doing this at a time when he deems it the best time to do it in revealing himself to be who he is, the Lord. Only the Lord could do what is being prophesied here. Then he goes on to say, I will make my holy name, my holy name among my people Israel. So, in other words, Israel is going to be shaking in their boots. We've just gotten done in our wars against our 6 Day War and the 73 War and the War of Independence, Gaza, Hezbollah, who knows who else. And now this, bigger than anything we've ever seen. And God, is going to come to Israel's defense, which God always will. He's never going to allow Israel to be defeated or destroyed. I mean, they're going to suffer from a lot of turmoil, but never again will they be destroyed and dispersed. So I will make known my holy name among my people Israel. I will no longer let my holy name be profaned, and the nations will know that I, the Lord, am the Holy One in Israel. So when this occurs, and we'll see in a moment how it's going to happen, but God is going to prove who he is by his divine intervention and protection of Israel. It's coming. It will surely take place, declares the sovereign Lord. This is the day I have spoken of. So God's sovereign. He's in complete control of this whole thing. Then those who live in the towns of Israel will go out and use the weapons for fuel and burn them up. The small and large shields, the bows and arrows, the war clubs and spears. For 7 years, they will use them for fuel. So I don't know exactly how that's going to work, but there's going to be enough leftover weapons that Israel can use them for fuel for 7 years. Now, isn't it interesting that the tribulation lasts 7 years? Which leads me to believe that this likely will occur before the tribulation actually starts. Um, and the other thing I would say is there's nothing that says this is going to be like a long, dragged out war. There's nothing that says it's going to be like World War I or two. It's going to be three. I think it's going to be relatively quick because these nations will come together. They'll converge on the mountains of Israel, and then God's going to deal with them very, very expeditiously. And the other thing that you don't see here is any indication that I don't want to say that no Jews are going to perish from this, but you just don't see that because God's going to take care of them. They will not need to gather wood from the fields or cut it from the forest because they will use the weapons for fuel. And they will plunder those who plundered them and loot those who looted them, declares the sovereign Lord. That goes back to Ezekiel 38, where the Dedan and Sheba nations will say, did you come to loot or to take plunder? So rather than them taking plunder from Israel, Israel will, because of what's going to happen, take plunder from them. On that day, I will give Gog a burial place in Israel, in the valley of those who travel east of the sea. That's the Dead Sea. It will block the way of travelers because Gog and all his hordes will be buried there. It will be called the Valley of Haman Gog. That's like a cemetery. So all of these bodies are going to have to be buried. And it's going to take 7 months, as we read here in the next verse. For 7 months, the Israelites will bury them in order to cleanse the land. It's kind of an interesting thing. Cleanse the land from what? Well, I guess just decaying bodies, for one thing, could be it. But could there be some form of radiation involved? Um, I mean, that's a bit speculative because I don't think God needs to use radiation, but uh, as we'll see in a moment, it's kind of like a place where if you see a dead body, don't touch it. Let the experts come in and do it. People will be continually employed in cleansing the land. They will spread out across the land, and along with others, they will bury any bodies that are lying on the ground. After 7 months, they will carry out a more detailed search. As they go through the land, anyone who sees a human bone will leave a marker beside it until the grave diggers bury it in the valley of Hamon-Gog. Why that is, I'm not real sure. Near a town called Hamanah. And so they will cleanse the land. So it takes 7 months, and after that, basically they're going to send uh, Israelites out to look and see if there's anything left over. Son of man, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Call to every kind of bird and the wild animals. Assemble and come together from all around to the sacrifice I'm preparing for you, the great sacrifice on the mountains of Israel. There you will eat flesh and drink blood. A little gory, but, you know, this indicates that there's going to be probably hundreds of thousands of dead bodies laying around. Um, You will eat the flesh of mighty men and drink the blood of the princes of the earth, as if they were rams and lambs, goats and bulls, all of them fattened animals from Bashan. As the sacrifice I am preparing for you, you will eat fat till you are glutted and drink blood till you are drunk. At my table you will eat your fill of horses and riders, mighty men and soldiers of every kind, declares the Lord. I will display my glory among the nations, and all the nations will see the punishment I inflict and the hand I lay of them. Isn't it interesting? We live in a time when all of the nations will be able to see what's taking place there. It certainly didn't have that ability during Ezekiel's time. From that day forward, the people of Israel will know that I am the Lord their God. Now remember that one of the main purposes, or the main purpose of the coming tribulation, is for God to fulfill all of the ancient promises he's made to the Jewish people. And at the end of the tribulation, there's going to be a remnant, that 1/3 who will survive, that will become Christians. They'll accept Jesus Christ. And the nations will know that the people of Israel went into exile for their sin, because they were unfaithful to me. So I hid my face for them and handed them over to their enemies, and they fell by the sword. But now he's bringing them back, and has been for the last couple of 107 years. I dealt with them according to their uncleanness and their offenses, and I hid my face from them. Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord, when you see sovereign Lord, it's just a confirmation that he is in charge. I will be zealous for my holy name. So it's just like we read in Ezekiel 36. He's protecting Israel. He has a covenant with them. He's never going to forsake that covenant because his name is attached to it, and he's the party to the covenant. So he has to fulfill these things. So they will forget their shame and all the unfaithfulness they showed toward me when they lived in safety in the land with no one to make them afraid. When I have brought them back from the nations, again, that puts it into today's time period. That doesn't mean next month. We don't know how much longer it's going to be, but they are coming back. And think about what we just read with all the anti-Semitism. What's that going to do? That's just going to entice more Jews to go to Israel, because that's the only place they're going to be able to go and be safe. So God is continuing to bring them back. When I have brought them back from the nations and have gathered them from the countries of their enemies, I will be proved holy through them in the sight of many nations. People are going to say, wow, that had to be God. That's a miracle. What? I mean, it had to be him. No other explanation, because we read earlier that there's going to be earthquakes, and he's going to turn the troops against each other, and a plague is going to be poured out on them. And it's just, there's no other explanation other than it had to be from God himself that this confederacy was dealt with the way they were. They will know that I am the Lord their God, for though I sent them into exile among the nations, I will gather them back from their own land, not leaving any behind. That's an interesting statement. I will no longer hide my face from them, for I will pour out my spirit on the people of Israel, declares the sovereign Lord. So that's Ezekiel 38 and 39. It's too bad that that the Hitlers and the other despots of the world don't understand that when they stick their finger, or they're sticking their finger in God's eye when they mess around with Israel. And when we see the United Nations and the European Union and the U.S. administration, virtually every world body coming against Israel, that's that's evidence right there that we are in the last days and that this event could have happened. Again, something's got to cause Israel to think they're in peace and safety first. They're certainly not there now, but and I still believe in my heart that somehow God's going to orchestrate that. Okay. Questions, comments on Ezekiel? We're watching it come together, folks. It's playing out. Everything we're seeing today is leading up to the time of Ezekiel and Armageddon and everything else that's yet to take place. So we're heading that direction. One of the reasons why we got to keep going at least partially through the summer.
Regarding burning the weapons, don't you think today that could be like nuclear weapons that they harvest the fuel out of and they run nuclear power plants?
Possible. It's possible. I guess
Yeah,
they
for
have
7
conventional nuclear weapons that they could bring in. Yeah, I guess. I know I read years ago in a book Grant Jeffries wrote that at least in those days the Russian weapons were made of a certain substance. I can't remember what it's called, but it was very flammable and could have been used. So I don't know. It's speculation, but it's possible. All right. All right.
Get vehicles will be full of fuel.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Yes. All right. So we're done with that, and we've got a few minutes left. So our next topic is going to be not so much gloom and doom, but we don't. And again, as we're going to see when we really start to delve into the rapture, we don't have anything to worry about. God is in charge; He is sovereign, and we are the bride of Christ. And He's made a promise to us that we're going to study now, and that's the rapture of the church. That He's not going to beat up His bride, us, the bride of Christ, and have us go through the coming tribulation. So, what I'd like to do is we'll probably spend a good 2 to 3 weeks looking at the rapture because there's a lot of different angles and moving parts. Big question as to when does it happen? Is this a modern concept? Can we disprove that? Which is that it was never even mentioned up until the 1850s or so with a guy by the name of John Darby, which a lot of the post-tribbers and amillennials will say that the rapture's not in the Bible. We're gonna refute that, I think, with relative ease. So I want to start out with. And this will just take us right up to probably about 5 of, and we'll quit. But this is an article I came across in February of 2023 by a guy by the name of Jonathan Brentner, and he gets into the fact that so many churches today are just ignoring the rapture. And so I'm going to let him speak for itself and read portions of this article, and it's entitled the rapture, the future tense of the gospel. And so what he's saying there is, we'll see when we read it, is the gospel is the death, the burial, the resurrection, and that's all past tense, and the second coming of Jesus Christ. That is the true gospel. And so he says that the future tense of the gospel and a message the church desperately needs. Somewhere in the past, a tragic divorce occurred. Theologians decided we must separate the return of Jesus for His church from the proclamation of the gospel. In other words, the gospel, which is correct, is the death, burial, and resurrection. But it's also the second coming. It includes that. The results of this untimely divorce have led to a lack of understanding among believers regarding Jesus appearing and the joyful anticipation that comes with such awareness. So they're being robbed of this incredible joy and anticipation and expectation of the rapture. Confused believers hear that they will surely die rather than meet Jesus in the air, which directly contradicts the New Testament in passages such as 1 Corinthians 15 and 1 Thessalonians 4. And we'll go through those in great detail. The Apostle Paul believed there would be many saints alive at the time of the rapture, but many preachers today disagree with him on this matter. So Paul talks about the rapture over and over again, but we're not going to talk about it. So I don't necessarily agree with the Apostle Paul. That's what's saying here. Jesus' imminent appearing in our receipt of immortal, and this is what the rapture is all about. We're going to receive immortal, imperishable bodies, were essential elements of the gospel preached to the early saints. Why has this changed so drastically in our day? The consequences of such negligence have been tragic. It has resulted in, number one, a near blackout of teaching about our blessed hope. The blessed hope is Titus 2:13. The blessed hope is the rapture. This negatively impacts new believers as well as seasoned saints, as it leaves them ill prepared to live in a fear-ridden society, because such teaching provides no prophetic context into which they place the violence and the lawlessness of our day or push for a new world order. So in other words, we're living in this time. You don't have to be really a student of Bible prophecy to know that things are really deteriorating rapidly and severely. But for those of us that know about the rapture, not that we're excited about what's happened, but it just means we're ever closer to that time. And think of all the, not just non-believers, but believers in so many churches that don't even know what the rapture is. That's just horrible. What the apostles wrote about its reception among the new converts. I want to take a look at 1 Thessalonians chapter 1. Thessalonians 1, 8 through 10. 1 Thessalonians 1, 8 through 10. The Lord's message rang out from you not only in Macedonia and Achaia. Your faith in God, this is Paul's letter to the church at Thessalonica, probably his first ministry. So he's teaching about the rapture very early on in his ministry. Therefore, we do not need to say anything about it, for they themselves report what kind of reception you gave us. They tell us how you turned to God from idols to serve the living and true God, and to wait for his Son from heaven, whom he raised, God the Father, raised from the dead. Jesus, who rescues us from the coming wrath. Now, I believe the entire tribulation is the wrath. There are those that say that the wrath doesn't begin until the midpoint. We'll explain why that can't be. The entire 7-year tribulation is the wrath. And Jesus is going to keep us or rescue us from the coming wrath. And like I've said many times, that word from in the Greek means out of. So if we're going to be captured and protected from the coming wrath, we have to be removed from it. That's what the rapture is all about. But sadly, so many are being denied this incredible promise. And then in 1 Thessalonians 4, and we'll get to that later, Paul emphasized the primary place of the dead in Christ during the rapture, telling his converts that Jesus would resurrect them first at his appearing. We see when we get into the rapture is going to take place, the dead in Christ. Every Christian from the time of Pentecost until that time will be resurrected. They're going to be resurrected out from the grave. Their souls are going to come back with Jesus, and the soul and the resurrected body are going to combine. That is the first resurrection. And then we who are alive at the time are just going to be changed. We're not going to be resurrected because we're still alive. So we're going to be changed. And then all in the twinkling of an eye, we're going to be caught up to meet Jesus in the air. And much more to come on that. In Romans 8:23, the apostle identifies a key aspect of Jesus appearing, the redemption of our bodies. And in verse 24 says, "For in this hope we are saved." We are saved. So death, burial, resurrection, and the second coming. Paul regarded the event we call the rapture as a key aspect of his preaching because it signified the hope contained in the saving message of the gospel. Jesus promises eternal life to all who believe in him. Our experience of it begins with his return for us, the rapture, when he gives us immortal bodies, and, as outlined in 1 Corinthians 15, and takes us to the place he has prepared for us. Remember John 14, where it says that I have to go away, and while I'm away, I'm going to prepare a place for you. And then I'm going to ultimately come back and take you to that place I have created for you. The rapture is the joyous future tense of the gospel and a message that people desperately need to hear. Number two, a diversion of the believer's focus to earthly aspirations. So by not teaching the Bible, we're not looking at what's going to happen, the glorious rapture. We're more concerned about other things. Number three, an open door to wokeism in the church and the eroding of gospel purity. If you're not teaching the whole counsel of God, including the rapture of the church, that allows all this outside stuff to enter in, to creep in. In First Peter or First Timothy, whichever, it says that they will creep in, or actually it's in the book of Jude. False doctrine, will creep into the church very unexpectedly and very subtly. And that's what happens if we're not teaching the whole counsel. So, an open door to wokeism as the church and so forth. Once a pastor, church, or denomination relegates a prophetic passage to allegory, and that's what a lot of people do, and when we take the position that when the plain sense makes common sense, take it no further. You don't try to change it and make it into something that it's not. So when they do allegorize, others apply the same method. So if you allegorize things like the rapture or the second coming or whatever, who's to say you can't allegorize salvation or the cross or anything else? And so we need to stand firm upon the truth in this plain meaning of the scriptures. I'll stop with that, and we'll finish with this article next time. So we've got this glorious, blessed hope, and we're going to learn more about it. I think everybody here has heard it at one time or another, but what a great reminder. And we're living in the time the rapture could happen. The rapture is an imminent event, which means it could happen at any moment.
So the rapture is second coming of Christ.
Rapture happens first, and then he comes back 7 years. The rapture is when he comes to the clouds and takes us to be with him. When he returns, we come back to the earth with him.
That's his second.
Yeah. So
Well,
it's the second coming is really a 2-act play. The rapture, where the saints are caught up to be with him in the air, and then when the saints come back at the end.
There's a lot of churches, including some churches that my kids go through, they talk about the second coming, but they don't talk about the rapture.
Right.
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 Yeah.
Right. But
Can't say it
it's
without the rapture.
difficult.
Population even.
Yeah. Right.
You know,
We
They're
have
missing
to be
out.
with them.
Yeah.
Go back
It's sad.
with them.
Yeah. So, any other comments? Question?
Or-
Okay. We'll be here next Tuesday. I'd like to start right at 6:30, like we generally do, and be good to go. All right. No dinner, but
You know,
Shirley's making prime rib.
you know,
Want dinner next week?
No.
sometimes we've done it where
Summer.
they have the little area down there with some tables and people can bring a sandwich and a drink and,
Yeah.
you know, can all sit together. So you can check that out and see people if they're interested. But we'd have to come
One night,
5:30,
we've got to
6,
all
whatever.
chip in and bring pizzas. Huh?
Yeah.
What do you think?
It sounds like the wrong kind of pie to me, actually.
Except now it has to be like $100 a piece.
Oh, that's true.
Like $30 now.
That's true.
And that, too.
Yeah.
Thanks for this.
Yeah, I think we should.
By me, Max, the
I'm
Yeah.
gonna sit.
extra large,
All
it's $25, sure.
right.
Yeah, the court. Yeah. Yes, whether's.
Father, we just thank you for this time. And Lord, what a blessing this group is. Lord, to be able to just come together as a small group and just study your word and just meditate upon just the glorious blessings that you have in store for us, Lord. We're so close to the time when we're going to be with you for all eternity. No more pain, no more suffering, no more crying, hurt, depression, nothing like that. It's all going to be gone. And it's just going to be glorious beyond anything we can imagine. And Lord, I know and I'm sure I can say for everybody in this room, we so look forward to that. And you tell us that we will receive, if we look forward to your coming, we're going to receive a crown of righteousness is reserved for all of those that anticipate and look forward to your coming. So I just thank you for that, Lord. I just uh, don't know how many crowns I'm going to get, but I do know I'm going to get that one. And I so look forward to you actually giving that to me. That's just mind-boggling, but it's going to happen, and it's going to happen after the rapture takes place. So I pray for everyone here, Lord. I thank you for this year, and Lord, we've covered a lot of material, and just amazing what's happening. It's just amazing to look at events unfold and relate them to your word, and it helps us to know that your word is truth and reliable and absolutely 100% truth from cover to cover. Pray for everyone here. Bring us back next week or whenever. And we pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.